everyone, Joshua Hanlon here at BrickCon Seattle 2022, and today I'm joined by a couple of builders who have built an entire LEGO theatrical production for us today. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves real quick.
Hey, I'm Doug Hughes. Great to see you guys again. This is my pal, Keith Downey. We have been working on this for about a year and planning it for a couple years. And like you said, theatrical kind of thing. So the idea was it's a show with a beginning, middle, and end. So when we start it, it'll actually have the curtains closed. And then you hit the button and the whole show unfolds. The curtains open, things happen, which I won't spoil now. And then the curtains close at the end of the show.
Awesome.
And
yeah. There's lots of action, so I think you can anticipate. What are a couple of things they can anticipate before we launch in here?
Sure. Yeah, we have airplanes, we have Zeppelins, and they all move. And then there's a surprise. I'm not going to spoil the big surprise at the end, but basically mostly looped stuff for like the little airplanes, and then the Zeppelin has a bit of a program track, and there's a biplane as well with a program as well. So
this will be very well known to the many viewers who've seen the smash 1930 film Hell's Angels, which was a very popular product upon which we based this build.
But for any of our viewers who weren't around at that time, this might be some new material.
We've been polling the crowd, and Keith's comment might be exaggerating slightly for how many people have heard of this movie. But
I love it, but that's a little teaser there, so we'll launch on into the show then.
Sounds great. Yeah, let's do it.
And we are back after that amazing theatrical production there. It looks incredible. I'm so glad you got that all up and running and were able to show that to us here. So why don't you go ahead and break this down for us a little bit and tell us kind of more details about what all is happening inside here.
Okay. So overall, the build is a Mindstorms EV3 build. So that it's all programmed through that framework. And so where to start?
There's a lot of moving parts here. It's difficult.
One of the first things I actually wanted to figure out was the sound, and so that was weird because Mindstorms plays sound through the brick, but it's like the quietest little thing. I've heard some funny things I can't say on camera of how quiet it is, but point being, I was like, okay, I need another solution, and eventually I settled on using the Mindstorms to push a button. And so that's like the first mechanism I figured out was like, okay, let's get a motor. We'll push a little button on something called an MP3 trigger board. It's like a little circuit board kind of thing. It's like an Arduino or something. And it just pushes the button, and it plays an MP3 that's saved on there. And it's just hooked to that Bluetooth speaker in the back corner. And that's the sound, which it's actually way easier than you'd think. It's like, whoo! But getting it to push the button was a little scary. Anyway. All right, so next,
noting that in the movie itself, the soundtrack, there's only sound at the very beginning and the very end of the original, again, 1930 movie, and then some random interspersed machine gun sound. So your friend Jesse was able to take it from the YouTube original soundtrack and splice it together in a way that made sense for a minute and 45-second show.
Yeah, which was fantastic because I didn't have to do it then. And then I set the whole show to the soundtrack he made. And he's like, oh, you'll be able to change this and that. I'm like, no, this is perfect because it's really set the stage for the beginning and end, and then all the action in the middle. So anyway, so you get the sound going. Now, one of the other weird things was getting the lights, and so I wanted to make sure that as part of the show, you can have kind of lights that are just on, right? And that's nice, and it sets the mood, but I wanted to tell the story using some color as well, and so there's a company called Mind Sensors, and they have a LED light strip you can control through the EV3 as well, which is just bonkers, right? It's like, oh, I can control the lights as well. So that's the whole top strip, and so when the explosion happens, when the airplane hits the Zeppelin, that's when it like turns red, and it matches with the sound, and it just makes that whole effect, right? So that was the other big thing. Everything else is like straightforward, just motor usage. Some were tough, some were easy.
You say straightforward, but I imagine it's a lot of very difficult moving parts in there.
That is fair, and also true. A really cool little thing was like the way you start the whole thing. I built this little trigger thing, and I was gonna have the public do it, and then I was like, oh, but there's COVID, so I'll just be here the whole time. That'll be fun. So it's fun. I feel a little bad that I couldn't like have kids. Here you go, touch this, but you know, I get sick. But yeah, so other motor stuff. The Zeppelin's probably the next hardest thing because it weighs a ton. I mean, when you hold it, you're like, oh, that's not really heavy, but think of you're hanging this on Technic Rope. I think it's been in a few different sets. I had it in that blue Technic tow truck set, the big one. And so the string is all real Lego parts. Doing my best here. And there's two large Mindstorms motors that each have like a worm drive attached to them. So the weight of the Zeppelin's not always like grinding the motor down because you can't backdrive the worm gear. So it's kind of nice. It holds it steady there, and it only moves when it wants to. So that's nice. But it's still, everything is like bowed with the weight. There's like these multiple Technic brick rows with lift arms connecting them, and they're just like, oh, is that so much weight? But it works. I mean, it's so great.
It looks great in there, and it's instantly recognizable. So you kind of, it looks like you have some hinges in there to kind of create the sides and the angles.
Yeah. Okay, so I should mention that Keith here designed the first version of the blimp, or Zeppelin, excuse me, for those aviation enthusiasts, not a blimp. Yeah. And the first version, the biplane, the big biplane, and the medium ones. And so I just did a second pass for what I wanted to have in here. And one of those things was to figure out how the heck to get the Zeppelin to split in the middle. Because we wanted that to be the big finale of the show. Everyone's like, oh, everything moves in circles. You know, little golf clap. That's nice. We've all seen that before. And then it's like, oh, it breaks in half. So that would be like the big finale. And so ended up being a really simple thing where there's a third string that hangs down the middle. So I talked about the two motors on the ends that raise it up and down. And when that third string that's just hanging from the middle, it's attached to a hinge in the middle, you go past that and it just goes taut, and it just, whoops, you just keep lowering the ends, but the middle can't lower anymore. And that's that. It just opens. Now, I don't want to give Grant a bigger head than he needs, but I'll shout out to Grant and Jason that I used the technique from their pop-up book to have the smoke and fire kind of pop out when the hinge was going on the Zeppelin. So shout out, guys. Thank you. That was actually super helpful.
Grant and Jason have come up with an occasional good parts technique in their day.
Sometimes. Yeah.
No, I love the way you did that, and it looked great on the show, and it definitely adds that extra element, like you were saying, to see the Zeppelin kind of under attack.
Yeah, it was just exciting, and you know, when it finally all came together in my garage, it was just like the greatest moment ever. But it didn't once the motion was great, right? And that's part of it, and that's the whole show. But part of it was you needed to have it covered. We needed to build the box around it, and needed to have curtains. I wanted it to look like a theater. So I'll give a shout out to my mom because I was thinking, like, who the heck is going to make curtains? Not me. Like, I had, like, stapled some practice curtains together, and I'm like, this is not going to fly. That is not how you want to make curtains. So thanks. That was super helpful, and I think they just came out, like, fantastic. So she did a bang-up job there.
Yeah, that's what makes the whole thing so amazing is not only did you do the build and the movement and everything, but you've even got the curtains that come apart. How is that controlled in there?
Yeah, so that's like a pretty simple thing. I keep saying that, but it's like each thing's
really talking yourself down here, Doug.
These things seem so simple, and then it's like insanely hard to actually make it happen. But I looked up curtains because I don't know much about the theater, but I was like, how do you make curtains? And I tried the sideways curtains, and I couldn't come up with a way to do it without having friction issues and slippage. And I was like, I just want to wind a string around a spool and pull the curtains open. That's it. But then they need to come shut. And so I was looking at the options, and these are called tableau curtains, and you kind of pull up in a little parabola type shape. And so all you have to do is wind up in a spool in the top corner, and it just pulls. It's attached to the corner of the curtain. It just pulls it along with it, and it goes through these little rings. And I'm not sure if I can show you the camera after, but if you spin the curtain around, there's just little rings basically sewn into it, and the string goes through them. And so you wind it up in the corner here, and it pulls up as it goes. And it's a simple concept, but transferring the power across and having it not slip gears, that was when it was like, my hair, I have a lot less now. But
another element I don't think we've touched on much is the plane design. So specifically the big one up front here, we can talk about that and kind of how that came together.
That's easy enough to just move out here for you to see in the camera. So I think it was a Sopwith Camel. I was looking through a World War I airplane vehicles book that my brother had given me, knowing I wanted to make this build, and I'm like, okay, that's a pretty good, brother. And I just picked the coolest looking airplane that I heard of, and it did our best. And so Keith took the first pass on it, and then what I wanted to do past what he did was give it the strut supports on the wings, and also give the wings offset, so the top wings are further forward than the bottom wings, and the bottom wings have a little bit of an angle, a little dihedral, and that's just a little more accurate to the build or to the airplane. And I work with a lot of airplane nuts, so it'd be unconscionable to not at least have a couple of those little details in there.
And we are here in Seattle, where you've got like the Museum of Flight, where you can see some great examples of planes like this and lots of other incredible aircraft. So it's a great place to come and check out some aircraft like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was just like, you needed something in all areas of the build to excite the viewer. And so this was the front centerpiece, the Zeppelin was the back centerpiece, and then there were just little fillers with the little biplanes flying around. So it's a little something for everyone, and a little something for each area of the build. And it was also fun because I could set stages of the build using this. So this comes out at the beginning as like, oh, that's cool, a biplane came out. And then it's like when you're getting ready to the finale, I wanted it out of the way. So it's a whoop, it kind of comes and hides behind the cloud. And then your eyes are drawn back to the Zeppelin. And
we saw a little bit of that movement. You kind of moved it in and out here. So it's kind of on those arms there that push it in and bring it out.
Actually, even simpler. It's just on a track, and that arm is just to hold the cables. I was worried about them getting wrapped around something, and I don't know. Who knows what would happen then? Pandemonium. So basically, it just has a little. Actually, stolen from Jason Allen again. Did I do anything new myself here? So I looked online at how do you use power function or whatever to motorize a train, and so it's a very simple, just a Mindstorms motor. I did again, didn't I? And not to disparage Jason's awesome design. And that cart on the right just kind of drags it back and forth on these tracks in there. And that whole rigmarole is just to hold the cables on the left there. So, yeah.
Another really cool element of the whole design is kind of the perspective and the sense of perspective that you've given this here with all of these clouds. So how did you kind of decide on how much of that kind of like white cloud element to put in and what the background is going to look like to provide that whole perspective?
Yeah, that was interesting. I knew I wanted to force perspective, so I needed a minifig scale. Well, I wanted a minifig scale thing up front, so it kind of makes you feel a little more in it. I mean, you could have made something bigger and really have a person in it, but at least this way it was like, okay, this is happening in minifig scale, and it just happens that everything else in the back is less. And so the Zeppelin obviously is way smaller than it would be at minifig scale, so it's all kind of that forced perspective. The little airplanes in the top are it's a medium size, right? So they're kind of closer than this front biplane, and then the Zeppelin, and then the little teeny guys that are crossing in the back. So basically, that's how you set the perspective. And then the clouds, that was just like something I did early on. I was just kind of mocking up some stuff, and I threw some white curved slopes, and it looked good. And with multiple rows, did a studio render, and I was like, ooh, okay, that looks pretty good. So why mess with it, right? And so just did a few rows. basically as many as my parts allow. And I probably would have done more if I had more parts, but honestly, I might have made it look more cluttered. So it's a little more theater-like, where there's just sort of a set row every so often, kind of like they do in I'm acting like I know what I'm talking about, but I just learned this last night behind the stage at BrickCon, so I do know what I'm talking about. No. So anyway, so it's kind of like a theater might do it, a few set rows. And then the ultimate backdrop was, well, I don't want to print out a picture. I wanted it to be Lego as much as possible. So the mosaic was just the only way to cover that kind of acreage. And I'm really happy how it came out. I like the color. I found a cool picture online of just clouds and doctored it up all big time and threw it in and changed some colors, added the dark blue, and I'm really happy with how it came out. So.
Yeah. I think it all works really well together and sets the scene very nicely. Now, another element we haven't touched on yet is the brick-built structure. So the whole outside of this is also brick-built, as if the interior wasn't good enough. So was that where you started with the build, or how did that work?
It was really simple, right?
Yeah. It's elementary, my dear viewers. Yeah, so, I mean, of all the things, it is just structure on the outside. So the complicated part is all the Technic inside. So I'm not sure if the camera can even get to it, but inside these towers are kind of structural towers. And so these are just shells. Everything on the outside is mainly a shell. And it's like this hodgepodge of multicolor, every brick I had, whatever, and some plates locking the side. And so that kind of set the structure. And then I have these massive Technic beams going across the front, across the sides, and a couple across the middle. And so that kind of set the inside. And I kind of always, maybe not always, but early on-ish, I kind of knew that to make it the theater-like thing, I needed to enclose it. And so I knew I needed some curtains on the outside, but I wanted to build as much out of brick as I could until I saw the size, and I was like, I'm making really big curtains and really small pillars. But really small is relative, right? I mean, I think I ordered 1,700 black 2x4s from some Slovenian seller. I wish I could remember the name because they were really fast, because I'd recommend it to everyone. But yeah, that was this. It was kind of glorious having this box of just 2x4 black bricks. Like, this is my baby. So yeah, that's how these came together. The only thing that's kind of exciting, I think, is the H. I mean, everything else is just kind of like, I just kept it simple because it was big, and it just, to build complicated at this size just didn't seem feasible. But just wanted a little flourish, so I added the H as Howard Hughes made the movie Hell's Angels, same last name as me, kind of cool. So, it's not hubris at all, nothing to do with that kind of crap. It's just like,
So, I think the whole thing did turn out really fantastic, though. What is it like when you're transporting this? And you've obviously got a lot of moving elements, so what was it like getting this to the show?
Yeah, Keith's right. It was hellacious. Basically, it's doable, and I don't know if I approached it the right way. I could have just made it one giant strong box and then put it on a slab of plywood or something and rented a truck. But I at the time thought it would be smarter. Whether or not it's smarter, I don't know. To have it be a modular thing. So basically, this thing breaks apart into, as Keith might think, a zillion parts, as he has helped schlep this stuff around all weekend. I mean, everything's in like half, so like this whole top structure here cuts in half, and so that chunk comes off. Same in the bottom. The clouds are each an individual section. Each of these towers is separate. The interior towers are separate, and so it's relatively straightforward, but it is an insanely long and arduous process to disassemble, pack up, saran wrap, put in boxes, and you might be actually surprised. This all actually fit in a RAV4, so I guess shout out Toyota. I don't know, but it was like right scraping the ceiling. It was unbelievable. So we somehow got it here, but
I think that does speak to your foresight, though, to be able to make it even remotely modular with something this big and this complicated. And the Zeppelin part, that fragile, it was really a feat. It did take a long time and a lot of effort to move it, and put it back together. And then it was also fun because the interior of all this really pretty exterior part is very multicolored and not so pretty. So the drama of people being like, what is Doug doing over there? That looks terrible. And then it comes out like this, and it's, it was really well designed.
If Toyota wants to reach out to help transport more incredible Lego creations, we're all ears here beyond the break. I think we could collaborate. But you mentioned like 1,700 2x4 bricks. Do you know the piece count overall at all in the build?
Not even close. I mean, I couldn't even take a guess. That's just for like the black 2x4s in these towers. I mean, there's got to be several thousand, or maybe 1,000. One might do 2x2s, and then you just extrapolate. And I mean, I made so many orders of just filler 2x long plates because I was building those Technic beams. So I'd order like a zillion 1x14, 1x16 Technic bricks, and then oops, now I need to like make a stack of them. So to separate them properly, you got to put 2 rows of plates in between. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of 2x plates. So I don't know. BrickLink is doing great. Thank you. The economy's running on my time here because holy crap, there was a lot of orders coming. But yeah, no idea how many. BrickLink might have some clue, but then how many parts did I have before?
Well, as a viewer, I gotta say I appreciate all the money and time and effort you put into this here. So we are at the end of the first public day at BrickCon, and everything seems to be running well. How is that internal kind of mechanics been going for you?
I'd say very well for the most part. There's one aspect, the track in the back that has there's 2 sets of 2 small biplanes. It's just like really grinding, and it's probably got a lot of ABS dust building up in there. So thinking about maybe adding a second extra large power functions motor to ensure that it just runs smooth all day tomorrow, or I'll just kind of let it go until it dies. We'll see. But otherwise, I've been really happy. I mean, the Mindstorm stuff has held up incredibly well for the Zeppelin. That's what I was most worried about because it's so much weight coming down. The curtains is the next thing, and that's mostly gone well. The sticky pads, my mom was smart. She's like, look, you want clean curtains. I don't want to like sew through the little sticky pads that are holding the rings on the curtain's backside on there because you'd see the string coming through. And so the sticky pads mostly hold, but a few of them have come off. So we've just been using packing tape and MacGyvering it, and honestly, I mean, it's fine, right? I mean, if it pops off, I mean, first of all, no one in the crowd knows. Oh, what ring? It didn't fall off.
I paid good money for these tickets. I'm not.
Well, some of the crowd was telling me I should be charging. I'm like, God, where were you like at the beginning of the day, man? So I'd say very happy. But remains to be seen another day. But another thing I guess going forward is that most of it isn't running continuously. We had it so even the power functions was switched on by the Mindstorms, and then that got desynced yesterday, so I just had it going all day. It's just maybe partly why it's kind of wearing down. But the Mindstorms part all runs only when the program runs, so that probably keeps the wear and tear a little lower, is a guess. But, yeah.
Well, I think the whole thing really turned out amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to do the show and then take us through everything here in the behind the scenes. So thanks to you and Keith over here. Thank you so much for your work as well. Both of you did a spectacular job, and it really is one of the outstanding pieces of BrickCon this year. So thanks for all your time and work.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. Always a pleasure chatting with you. So yeah, cheers. Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Will do.
Simple work.
Very simple.